It was supposed to be a routine delivery, a loyal dog bringing new life into the world. The vet counted 1 puppy, then 2, then 5, until an astonishing 15 tiny newborns lay nestled against their exhausted mother. But just as the vet prepared to celebrate the miracle, his smile froze. Something was wrong. The puppies weren't ordinary. In fact, they weren't even dogs at all. What followed was a discovery so shocking it left everyone speechless. A story that would shake the entire town. Stay with us, because what happens next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The clinic was unusually quiet that night, the kind of stillness that carried a sense of anticipation. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, its sound amplified by the silence while the faint smell of antiseptic hung in the air. In the corner, a large German shepherd lay on a soft blanket, her sides rising and falling in heavy breaths. She was strong, loyal, and beloved by her family, but tonight she was vulnerable. Her time had come. After weeks of waiting, the moment of birth was finally here. The vet, a man seasoned by years of practice, moved around the room with steady hands. He had delivered countless litters before, each one unique, each carrying its own mixture of joy and challenge. Yet, as he prepared his instruments and checked the mother's vitals, he couldn't shake the feeling that this night would be different. Her belly was larger than most, her movements slower, her eyes deeper with fatigue. Something about her condition whispered that surprises lay ahead. The dog shifted slightly, releasing a low whine, her eyes meeting the vet's as if asking for reassurance. He crouched beside her, stroking her damp fur gently. "You're safe here," he murmured. "We'll get through this together." Her tail wagged faintly, a brief spark of trust amidst her exhaustion. The bond between animal and caretaker was clear, and it steadied the room like an anchor against uncertainty. Outside, the world moved on, unaware of the miracle about to unfold within these walls. The storm clouds that had gathered earlier in the evening had passed, leaving behind a cool breeze that rattled the clinic's windows. It felt as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for life to emerge. The vet adjusted the lights, signaled to his assistant, and took his place at the mother's side. The room grew tense with expectation. Every sound, the dog's labored breaths, the faint shuffle of the assistant, the rhythmic ticking of the clock, felt louder, sharper. The vet wiped his brow and whispered a quiet prayer for strength. Tonight wasn't just another delivery. Tonight, something extraordinary was about to happen, though no one in that room could possibly imagine how far beyond ordinary it would be. The dog's breathing grew heavier, each inhale followed by a low whimper that echoed softly through the clinic. Her body shifted restlessly, muscles tightening and releasing as the first waves of labor gripped her. The vet leaned closer, his trained eyes observing every detail. He noted the contractions building in rhythm, the subtle tension in her abdomen, and the way her ears twitched at each surge of pain. She was strong, but she was also exhausted, her eyes clouded with fatigue. The assistant moved quickly, placing fresh towels on the table and preparing a small incubator nearby. She glanced at the vet nervously. "She looks so tired," she whispered. He gave a reassuring nod, though his expression was serious. "She's been carrying a large litter," he replied. "This will take everything she has." His words hung in the air, heavy with both warning and hope. The mother dog let out a soft cry, her paws shifting against the blanket as the contractions intensified. She turned her head toward the vet, eyes wide and uncertain, searching for comfort. He crouched low, stroking her head gently. "You're doing well," he murmured. "Stay with me, girl. Just a little longer." His voice carried calmness, though inside his chest his heart was beating faster. Each delivery carried risk, and no two were ever the same. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The clinic, though small, became a world of focus and tension. The ticking clock faded into the background, replaced by the rhythmic pattern of contractions and the shallow panting of the mother. The assistant dabbed the dog's forehead with a damp cloth, whispering soft words of encouragement, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. Then came the moment they had been waiting for. The dog tensed sharply, her entire body trembling as the first puppy made its way into the world. The vet moved swiftly, guiding the process with practiced precision. The air filled with the sound of tiny cries, fragile yet full of life. Relief washed over the room, and the mother's eyes softened as she nuzzled her newborn instinctively. The assistant exhaled, her voice breaking with emotion. "The first one's here." The vet smiled faintly, though his focus remained unbroken. "One down," he said softly. "But there are more to come." He could feel it. This was only the beginning of a long and difficult night. The mother licked her puppy tenderly, her strength returning in brief bursts with every cry of her newborn. Despite her exhaustion, instinct surged through her veins, urging her to protect and nurture. The vet and his assistant exchanged a quiet glance. They both knew. This litter was going to be unlike any they had ever witnessed before. The tiny cries filled the clinic, piercing through the heavy silence that had dominated just moments before. The vet gently lifted the first puppy, cradling it in his hands before placing it against a warm towel. Its tiny chest rose and fell with quick breaths, its eyes sealed shut, its fragile body trembling with newness. The assistant's face softened as she leaned closer. "So small," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. The mother dog, despite her exhaustion, immediately reached out, her nose nudging the newborn closer. Instinct guided her as she began to lick the pup clean, stimulating its breathing further. Her eyes, though weary, glowed with maternal determination. For a brief moment, the room was filled not with tension, but with the quiet miracle of life unfolding. The vet allowed himself a faint smile, his shoulders easing as relief washed over him. Minutes later, another contraction shook her body, stronger this time. The vet and his assistant exchanged a glance, already preparing the towels and instruments once more. With steady hands, he guided the second puppy into the world, its tiny squeaks joining the chorus of fragile life. The first pup shifted against its mother, already instinctively drawn to warmth and comfort. The cycle of life was repeating, each moment precious, each sound reassuring. The assistant kept count, noting every detail, her heart swelling as the litter grew. "Too healthy," she announced softly, her words carrying pride. The vet nodded, though he kept his focus sharp. "Let's be ready for more." His tone was calm, but inside he marveled at the miracle before him. Each birth carried its own risks, yet here they were, two tiny lives clinging to the world, guided by the strength of their mother. For a few precious moments, time seemed to pause. The storm outside had faded into nothingness, replaced by the soft chorus of newborn cries and the gentle sounds of a mother tending to her young. The vet glanced at the German shepherd, admiration filling his chest. Despite her exhaustion, despite the challenges ahead, she radiated courage. And though no one in the room knew it yet, this was just the beginning of a story that would soon take an extraordinary turn. The clinic, once quiet, now echoed with the fragile cries of new life. The vet carefully placed the second puppy beside its sibling, both squirming weakly under the glow of a warming lamp. The mother, exhausted yet determined, shifted slightly to nuzzle them, her tongue brushing gently over their damp fur. For a moment, the room carried only warmth and relief, but then another contraction rippled through her body, stronger, sharper than before. The vet's brows furrowed. More were coming. He prepared swiftly, his hand steady but his pulse quickening. Within minutes, a third puppy slid into the world, its cry joining the chorus. Then a fourth. The assistant's eyes widened as she placed each one carefully beside the others, their tiny bodies wriggling in unison. 4 already, she murmured. "That's a big start." The vet nodded, his jaw tight. "And she's not done yet." Another contraction followed, and another life emerged, 5, then 6. The assistant's notepad filled with numbers and observations, her handwriting growing hurried. 6 healthy, she said aloud, though her voice carried disbelief. The average litter for a German shepherd was usually between 6 and 9. They were already at the higher end, and the mother still showed no sign of slowing. The mother's body trembled with effort. Her breaths labored, yet her eyes remained focused, her instincts driving her forward. She licked each puppy with care, refusing to let exhaustion break her duty. The vet crouched close, his hand on her side. "Easy, girl," he whispered. "You're doing so well." His calm voice steadied her, though deep down he couldn't ignore the unease curling in his stomach. By the time the 9th puppy was born, the assistant stared in disbelief. 9 already? She whispered. The table was filling quickly, the warming lamps crowded with squirming newborns. But the mother wasn't finished. Contraction after contraction racked her body, and more tiny cries pierced the air. 10, 11, 12. The assistant pressed a hand to her chest, glancing at the vet. This isn't normal. The vet's expression was unreadable, his focus sharp. He had seen large litters before, but rarely this many, and never with such intensity. He checked each newborn, noting their sizes, their cries, their astonishing numbers. "She's strong," he said quietly, though his voice betrayed a hint of concern. "But this is extraordinary." By the time the 15th puppy arrived, the room had fallen into stunned silence. The mother lay exhausted, her body trembling, yet she still nudged each newborn closer, refusing to let her strength falter. The assistant stared at the rows of tiny lives spread across the blankets. 15, she whispered. 15 puppies. How is this even possible? The vet stood motionless, his gaze sweeping over the extraordinary sight. 15 tiny bodies, crying and squirming, all brought into the world by one exhausted but unyielding mother. Relief mingled with unease. Something about this was far beyond ordinary, and though they didn't yet realize it, the real shock was still to come. The clinic was filled with the tiny chorus of whimpers and squeaks. 15 newborns, each fragile and restless, squirmed beneath the glow of the warming lamps. Their cries blended into a symphony of life. But the mother lay still, her chest heaving as though every breath was a battle. Her fur clung to her body, damp with sweat and effort, her eyes half closed in exhaustion. She had given everything she had to bring her babies into the world. The vet crouched beside her, his hand gently pressed against her side. He could feel the strain in her muscles, the weakness in her body. "You did it, girl," he murmured softly, his voice filled with admiration. 15 lives. You're incredible. Yet behind his praise was concern. No mother should endure this much. 15 puppies wasn't just remarkable, it was nearly impossible. And the toll it had taken on her was clear. The assistant moved quickly, setting bowls of fresh water and food nearby, but the mother barely stirred. Her head drooped against the blanket, her eyes clouded with fatigue. Still, when one of the newborns whimpered more loudly than the rest, her ears twitched. Summoning what little strength she had left, she lifted her head and nudged herself forward, dragging her weary body closer to her babies. The sight was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Even at the brink of collapse, her instincts refused to let her stop. She licked the nearest puppy, nudging it back into place beside its siblings. Her breaths were ragged, but her focus was sharp. Every tiny sound pulled her back from the edge of exhaustion, reminding her of her purpose. She was not just a mother, she was a protector, a provider, a guardian of 15 fragile lives. The vet's assistant blinked back tears as she watched. "She won't let herself rest," she whispered. The vet nodded solemnly. "It's instinct. A mother's love is stronger than her pain." His gaze lingered on the exhausted dog, admiration heavy in his expression. He had seen maternal devotion before, but never on this scale. This was beyond natural, it was extraordinary. Hours passed, the night bleeding into morning. The puppies squirmed, their cries constant, demanding warmth and nourishment. The mother, trembling, allowed them to press against her, offering what little strength she still carried. The vet prepared supplements, carefully administering fluids to keep her from collapsing completely. Even then, she resisted being moved, her eyes following her babies with unyielding devotion. At one point, her body gave a violent shudder and the assistant gasped. "She can't go on like this," she said, panic lacing her voice. The vet placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "She's fighting for them. We'll fight for her." He administered an injection to ease her pain, whispering encouragement as though she could understand every word. The dog responded with a faint wag of her tail before lowering her head once more beside her litter. Despite her exhaustion, the bond between mother and puppies only grew stronger. She pressed her nose into the pile of newborns, her eyes softening each time one cried. It was as though their tiny voices gave her the will to endure. Each whimper a reminder that her struggle had purpose. Her love transcended the limits of her body, keeping her anchored to her role even when nature demanded she collapse. The vet sat back, silently humbled. He had witnessed countless births, but none had left him this shaken. 15 lives owed their existence to her courage, and she refused to let exhaustion sever that bond. As dawn's light spilled into the clinic, illuminating the remarkable scene, he knew one thing for certain. This mother's devotion was not just powerful, it was unbreakable. For a while, the clinic felt like a sanctuary of miracles. 15 tiny lives squeaked and wriggled, clinging to their exhausted mother. The vet and his assistant worked tirelessly, ensuring each newborn was warm and breathing, their fragile bodies tucked beneath soft towels. Yet as the initial relief began to fade, something unsettled the vet. He leaned closer to the litter, his brow furrowing as he studied the newborns one by one. At first it was subtle, details that could have been overlooked in the haze of delivery. Their paws were narrower, their nails longer than expected for newborn puppies. Their ears, though folded, seemed oddly pointed, sharper at the tips. One pup yawned, revealing tiny teeth that appeared earlier than they should have. The vet blinked, unsettled, but said nothing yet. Exhaustion, he told himself, could play tricks on the eyes. The assistant, busy recording their weights, glanced up and caught his expression. "Is everything all right?" she asked. The vet hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "They're unusual." He reached down, lifting one gently. The pup squirmed in his palm, letting out a cry that sounded just a shade different. Not quite the high-pitched squeal he expected, but something deeper, sharper. The sound raised goosebumps along his arms. As the mother shifted, pulling her puppies closer, the vet noted another detail. Their coats. While some appeared normal, others had strange markings, patterns not common in dogs, almost wild in appearance. One carried faint stripes along its back. Another had a dark mask over its eyes that seemed too defined, too deliberate. The assistant leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They don't look like dogs." The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. The vet shook his head quickly, unwilling to give in to suspicion just yet. "They're newborns," he said firmly, though unease edged his tone. "Features can change as they grow. Right now they just need care." Yet inside his mind raced. He had delivered hundreds of litters in his career, but never had he seen pups quite like these. He returned them gently to their mother, who licked them with unwavering devotion. To her there was nothing unusual, only love and duty. But to the humans watching, the strangeness was undeniable. The assistant shivered, glancing once more at the squirming pile. "Something's not right," she whispered. The vet stood back, arms crossed, his eyes locked on the litter. He couldn't explain it, not yet. But one thing was certain. The night's miracle carried a mystery within it. And as much as he wanted to dismiss the unease gnawing at his chest, he knew the truth would eventually demand to be revealed. The clinic had quieted again, the newborns huddled close against their weary mother. Their tiny bodies twitched in sleep, soft cries breaking the silence every so often. The vet stood nearby, his eyes fixed on them, unable to ignore the unease gnawing at his thoughts. Something about these puppies wasn't adding up, and the only way to silence his doubts was to take a closer look. He carefully lifted one of the larger pups from the blanket, cradling it in his hands. The animal squirmed, its limbs flailing with surprising strength. As he examined its paws, his frown deepened. The pads were shaped differently, longer and narrower, the claws sharp and already pronounced, features he would never expect at this stage of development. When the pup opened its mouth to cry, the sound wasn't the shrill squeak of a newborn puppy. It was deeper, rawer, almost feral. The assistant leaned over his shoulder, her breath catching. "That's not normal," she whispered, her eyes wide with worry. The vet gave a slow nod, setting the pup gently back with the others. He picked up another, this one smaller, its fur patterned with strange markings across its back. He ran his fingers through the coat, his brow furrowing as he noticed its unusual texture. Thicker, coarser than the soft fuzz of newborn dogs. One by one, he inspected them, his unease growing with each discovery. Some bore faint stripes. Others had oddly shaped ears that seemed too pointed, too sharp. Their cries varied in pitch, some carrying a wild resonance that prickled the air. The assistant stepped back, her voice trembling. "They don't look like dogs at all." The vet straightened slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He turned to the exhausted mother who lay watching them with unwavering devotion. To her there was no question. These were her babies, her responsibility, her love. But to him the evidence was mounting. These newborns were different. Different in ways he couldn't yet explain. He took a deep breath, his voice low but steady. "Something's very wrong here," he said. "And we need to find out what." The vet's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the lamp above the examination table, casting a brighter light over the litter. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier as though it too sensed the weight of what was about to unfold. The mother dog shifted protectively, her weary eyes following his every move, her nose pressed close to her newborn's. She trusted him, but her instincts warned her that something was different tonight. He picked up another pup, one of the smallest, its body no larger than his palm. At first glance, it appeared normal enough. Tiny paws, sealed eyes, damp fur. But when he turned it slightly, the light revealed markings along its spine. Not spots, not patches of color, but faint stripes like brushstrokes of a wild pattern. His stomach tightened. He gently opened the pup's mouth, expecting a soft pink tongue and toothless gums. Instead, he froze. Tiny, sharp teeth had already erupted, gleaming faintly under the light. The assistant gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Teeth already? That's impossible." The vet said nothing, his throat dry, his mind racing. Newborn dogs never had teeth, not for weeks. This wasn't a developmental quirk. This was something else entirely. He placed the striped pup back and lifted another, this one squirming with surprising strength. As it wriggled in his hands, he noticed the way its claws dug into his palm. They were sharper, longer than any he'd seen on a newborn. Like miniature talons designed not for stumbling first steps, but for clinging, for hunting. The pup let out a cry then, and it wasn't a soft whimper. It was a low, guttural sound that sent a chill down his spine. The assistant backed away, shaking her head in disbelief. They can't be." Her voice faltered as she struggled to find words. The vet placed the pup down carefully, his heart hammering. He looked at the litter. Really looked this time, and the truth became undeniable. The shapes of their ears, the unnatural strength in their tiny bodies, the sharpness of their cries, none of it belonged to ordinary puppies. He exhaled slowly, the weight of the discovery pressing on him. "These aren't dogs," he said at last, his voice low, almost a whisper. The assistant stared at him, pale and trembling. "Then what are they?" The question hung in the air like thunder, unanswered, terrifying. The mother dog, oblivious to the revelation, licked her unusual newborns tenderly, curling her body around them as if shielding them from the world. To her, they were hers no matter what they were. But to the vet and his assistant, the miracle of 15 had twisted into something far stranger, a mystery that defied everything they thought they knew. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. "These aren't dogs." For a moment, the world inside the clinic seemed to stop. The steady ticking of the wall clock grew louder, the hum of the lamp harsher. Every small sound amplified in the heavy silence that followed. The assistant froze, her eyes wide, her breath caught halfway in her throat. The vet's statement was unthinkable, yet everything he had observed made denial impossible. The mother shifted slightly, pulling the litter closer to her chest. Her tongue brushed across their fur, a mother's gesture of love that knew no boundaries, no labels. She didn't care what they were. They were hers, and her duty was clear. The contrast between her simple loyalty and the human, stunned confusion made the moment feel even heavier. The assistant finally spoke, her voice trembling. "If they're not dogs, then what are we looking at?" She glanced down at the litter, her hands clutching her notepad so tightly the paper began to crumple. Each tiny creature twitched and cried, their strange cries sharp and haunting in the quiet room. "They look almost like—" Her voice trailed off, unable to finish the thought. The vet didn't answer right away. His gaze shifted from one newborn to another, cataloging every detail. The premature teeth, the unusual claws, the faint stripes and markings. His chest tightened as his mind raced for explanations. Could it be a genetic mutation, a hybrid, something no one had documented before? None of the answers brought comfort. A knock at the door startled them both. It was one of the neighbors who had helped earlier during the storm, carrying a tray of food and blankets. She smiled warmly as she entered, but the moment her eyes fell on the litter, her expression faltered. She set the tray down slowly, leaning closer. 15? She whispered in awe, but then she frowned. They don't look right. Her words confirmed what the vet and his assistant already knew but hadn't dared say aloud. The room seemed to shrink as all three adults stood silently, the strange newborns wriggling restlessly under the mother's protective gaze. The sound of their cries, sharper and deeper than any puppy's, filled the space like an unsettling melody. The assistant finally whispered, "Should we tell people?" Her voice quivered, caught between fear and responsibility. The vet exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples. "Not yet. We need to understand what we're dealing with first. If this gets out now—" His voice faded, but the unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Panic. Gossip, chaos. The mother dog raised her head then, her eyes meeting the vet's. For a fleeting moment, it felt as though she understood their unease, as though she were silently challenging them. These were her babies. Different or not, they were hers, and she would protect them with every ounce of strength she had left. The room fell into silence again, broken only by the newborn's cries. Every sound seemed sharper, every movement heavier. The assistant hugged her arms to her chest. The neighbor backed away uneasily, and the vet stood still, his thoughts a whirlwind of questions he couldn't answer. What lay before them was no longer just a miracle of birth. It was a mystery that defied reason, a secret too strange to share and too powerful to ignore. And as the weight of the night pressed down on them, each person in that room realized one chilling truth. Life inside the clinic had changed forever. The clinic's air was thick with tension. The assistant and neighbor exchanged uneasy glances, their eyes constantly drifting toward the strange newborns. The vet, though trying to remain composed, couldn't shake the unease gripping his chest. Yet amid all the uncertainty, one figure remained calm, resolute, and unshaken: the mother dog. She lay curled tightly around her 15 newborns, her body trembling from exhaustion, but her spirit unyielding. Every time one of the humans leaned too close, her ears pricked, her body tensed, and a low growl rumbled from her throat. Her message was clear. Whatever doubts they carried, these were her babies, and no one would harm them. The assistant whispered, "She knows we're suspicious." Her voice quivered, torn between fear and respect. The vet nodded, crouching lower. "She feels our hesitation. But to her, none of this matters. They're hers, no matter what they are." His words carried a weight that silenced the room. One of the newborns let out a sharper cry, its tiny claws flailing as it wriggled against its siblings. Instantly the mother shifted, nudging it back into place with her nose and licking it clean. Her eyes softened as she worked, the fatigue in her body forgotten in the face of her duty. The humans watched, humbled. Whatever questions plagued their minds, her devotion was undeniable. The vet reached out cautiously, placing a small dish of water within her reach. She sniffed it briefly before turning back to her litter, refusing even to take a sip until every pup was settled. The neighbor whispered, "She's guarding them like her life depends on it." The assistant added quietly, "Maybe it does." The vet's gaze lingered on her. He had seen countless mothers in his years, but none with such fierce determination. It was as if she understood the strangeness of her offspring, as if she knew the world would question them, and so she had taken it upon herself to be their shield. Her instincts transcended fear. They were raw, primal, unbreakable. The room grew still again, the humans careful not to disturb her. The mother lowered her head, resting it gently over her litter like a living barrier. Her breathing slowed, her body sagging with exhaustion, but her eyes remained half open, alert, unwilling to fully surrender to rest. The vet exhaled deeply, his thoughts torn between science and heart. Whatever these creatures were, one truth had become undeniable. They had a mother who would stand against the world for them. And in that moment, the room filled not with fear, but with a powerful reminder that love, in its purest form, sees no differences, only bonds. By the next morning, the clinic was no longer just a quiet refuge, it had become the center of whispers. What had begun as hushed conversations between the assistant and neighbor soon slipped into the streets. Word of a dog giving birth to 15 puppies had already been astonishing enough, but when murmurs hinted that these newborns were different, curiosity spread like wildfire. Neighbors began stopping by the clinic, pretending to drop off food or supplies, but their real purpose was clear. They wanted to glimpse the miracle or the mystery everyone was talking about. Faces pressed against the glass windows, eyes wide with wonder, some filled with excitement, others with unease. The chorus of newborn cries drifting out into the street only fueled the intrigue. The vet tried to maintain order, gently turning away those who lingered too long. "The mother needs rest," he explained firmly. "This isn't a spectacle, it's a medical case." But even his calm authority couldn't stop the tide of rumors. Whispers turned into speculation, and speculation grew into wild stories. Some claimed the puppies were wolves, others whispered about strange hybrids, creatures from the forest, even omens. Inside, the mother remained unaware of the commotion outside the walls. She curled tightly around her litter, her instincts focused only on warmth, safety, and love. The assistant, glancing nervously at the growing crowd, asked, "Should we tell them the truth?" The vet shook his head, his jaw set. "Not yet. They wouldn't understand. Right now they need protection, not attention." Despite his efforts, the clinic had become a beacon for curiosity. Each knock on the door, each murmured question from a passerby weighed heavily on him. The secret they were keeping was fragile, and if it escaped too soon, the consequences could spiral beyond control. Still, as the day wore on, he realized one truth. This story was no longer his to contain. The world outside had already begun to sense that something extraordinary had happened here. And soon, no matter how hard he tried, the secret of the 15 would not stay hidden for long. By the third day, the whispers had traveled far beyond the town. What began as local curiosity soon caught the attention of outsiders, reporters, animal enthusiasts, and eventually scientists. It was only a matter of time before the clinic door swung open to reveal two figures in lab coats, clipboards in hand, their eyes sharp with curiosity. They introduced themselves formally, though their expressions betrayed the eagerness of people chasing a mystery. The vet, weary from sleepless nights, greeted them cautiously. He explained the situation in measured words, omitting nothing but choosing carefully how much weight to give his own suspicions. The scientists exchanged looks, then requested to see the newborns. The assistant hesitated, her hand hovering near the mother's bed. "She won't like strangers near them," she warned. The mother, as if understanding, already stirred, her ears flat, her body curling tighter around her litter. The lead scientist crouched a respectful distance away, adjusting his glasses as he observed. "Remarkable," he murmured. 15 is rare enough, but—" His voice trailed off as one of the newborns stretched, baring tiny premature teeth. His colleague scribbled furiously, sketching notes and diagrams. The low guttural cry of another pup filled the room, causing both scientists to pause. "That," the second whispered, "is not a canine vocalization I recognize." The mother growled softly, her eyes fixed on the strangers. The vet placed a calming hand on her back. "Easy, girl. They won't hurt them." But even he wasn't sure. Scientists came for answers, but answers often demanded tests. Tests the vet wasn't certain he wanted for these fragile creatures. The scientists requested permission to examine the pups more closely, but the mother's protective instincts made it nearly impossible. Each time they inched forward, she bared her teeth, her growl deepening. "She won't allow it," the assistant whispered. The lead scientist sighed, stepping back. "Then we'll observe from here." For hours they watched, recording every detail. The premature teeth, the sharp claws, the unusual patterns on their fur, the cries that seemed half wild. Their excitement was evident, though tempered by the tension in the room. Finally, one of them looked at the vet, eyes gleaming. "You understand what this means, don't you? This could be an undocumented species, a genetic anomaly, possibly even a hybrid no one has ever recorded." The vet's stomach tightened. He had feared as much, but hearing it aloud gave the moment a new weight. The assistant glanced nervously at the litter, then at the scientists. "What happens now?" she asked. The lead scientist closed his notebook with a snap. "Now," he said carefully, "we study them. But the decision is yours, doctor." His gaze lingered on the vet, unblinking. "They're under your care. But if you want answers, you'll have to let us in." The vet looked down at the mother, her body shielding her newborns with unshakable devotion. For her there was no science, no question of origin, only love. And in that moment he felt torn between two worlds, the pursuit of truth and the duty to protect. The clinic felt heavier than ever before. The scientists had left for the evening, their notebooks filled with observations, their promises of answers lingering in the vet's ears. Yet instead of relief, their visit had left behind an even greater weight. He sat at his desk long after the lights had dimmed, his eyes fixed on the mother dog curled tightly around her litter. Her chest rose and fell slowly, her body still fragile from the ordeal, but her gaze remained sharp, unyielding. She was a sentinel, a guardian, unwilling to let the world near her babies. The assistant sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "What are we going to do?" she whispered. The vet rubbed his temples, the exhaustion pressing down like a physical burden. If we allow further study, they'll want samples, tests, maybe even separation. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the conflict within. But if we refuse, we may never know what they truly are. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft whimpers of the newborns. Each tiny sound carried weight, tugging at the vet's conscience. He had always been a man of science, trained to seek answers, to catalog and understand. But he was also a man of compassion, bound by an oath to protect the lives entrusted to him. Tonight those two worlds clashed in a way he had never imagined. He rose from his chair and approached the mother. She lifted her head immediately, her ears pricking, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. The vet knelt carefully, his voice gentle. "I know you don't understand my words," he murmured, "but I understand yours." Her growl softened as he placed a hand on the blanket near her pups. "You're telling me they're yours. That nothing else matters." The assistant joined him, crouching low. "She doesn't see the differences we do," she said softly. "To her, they're perfect. They're hers. Isn't that enough?" Her words pierced the vet's heart, simple yet profound. He looked at the newborns, each strange, each unlike any puppy he had ever seen, yet alive, breathing, seeking warmth. To strip them away from their mother, to subject them to cold examination, felt like a betrayal of everything he stood for. And yet the world outside was hungry. The rumors had already grown beyond control. Scientists would return, reporters would follow, and soon the clinic's fragile walls would no longer shield them. The vet closed his eyes, torn by the weight of it all. What if protecting them means hiding the truth? He whispered. What if the world deserves to know? The assistant shook her head. Does the world deserve to know more than they deserve to live in peace? Her words echoed in the stillness, and the vet realized she was right. Sometimes truth came second to love. Sometimes the greatest act of courage wasn't uncovering mysteries, but protecting them. The mother sighed, laying her head gently across her litter. The pups stirred, their cries quieting as they pressed closer to her warmth. It was a picture of devotion, unshakable and pure. The vet felt a lump rise in his throat. In that moment, his decision became clear. He turned to his assistant, resolve hardening in his eyes. We protect them. No matter what they are, no matter what the world says, we protect them. The assistant nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. The clinic felt lighter, not because the burden was gone, but because the choice had finally been made. The vet returned to his desk, scribbling in his journal not a diagnosis, not a scientific label, but a single truth. They are hers. And that is enough. The next morning, the vet woke with his decision still weighing heavily on his chest, but now it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like resolve. He knew what he had to do. The scientists would return, perhaps with greater insistence, perhaps with pressure from outside forces, but he would not let them take the litter away. These newborns, no matter how strange, belonged with their mother, and as long as they were under his roof, he would defend them. When the assistant arrived, she found him already at work, reinforcing the clinic's kennels and preparing a private space for the family. So you've decided? She said quietly, her voice laced with both worry and relief. He looked up, determination etched in his tired features. Yes, no labs, no cages. They stay with her. Word had already spread further, and by midday, townspeople began gathering outside the clinic. Some brought food, others blankets, but many simply came to ask questions. The vet stepped outside to address them, the crowd's chatter falling into expectant silence. He cleared his throat, choosing his words carefully. Yes, the dog gave birth to 15. Yes, they are unusual. But they are alive. They are fragile, and they need care, not spectacle. The crowd shifted uneasily, whispers rippling through it. A man called out, "What are they then?" Another added, "The scientists say they could be something new." The vet raised his hand for quiet, his voice firm. What they are is hers, and that's all that matters right now. His words hung heavy in the air, simple yet undeniable. Slowly, heads began to nod, the tension easing. The mother dog, watching from inside the clinic, seemed to sense the shift. She curled tighter around her newborns, her body no longer trembling with fear, but steadied by the invisible shield of protection forming around her. The assistant smiled faintly. "They're listening to you," she whispered. Over the next few days, the community's role transformed. Instead of pressing for answers, they began to offer support. Children drew pictures of the brave mother and her 15 babies. Neighbors donated supplies, from fresh food to heating lamps. Slowly, The clinic became less of a curiosity and more of a sanctuary. The vet often sat quietly in the evenings, watching the mother nurse her litter, the strange cries blending into a chorus of resilience. He knew challenges still lay ahead, but one truth had been cemented. His choice had shifted everything. These lives were no longer anomalies to be studied. They were family to be cherished. Weeks passed, and the clinic that once felt like a place of mystery now radiated warmth and life. The mother dog had regained her strength, her coat shining once more, her eyes brighter with pride. Around her, the 15 newborns had grown, their small bodies sturdier, their cries louder, and their movements filled with restless energy. They were still unusual. Each bore markings, shapes, and instincts unlike ordinary puppies, but to her they were perfect. And in time, the town began to see them through her eyes. The vet often found himself sitting quietly in the evenings, watching the family he had fought to protect. He would see the mother stretched out, the strange yet beautiful young ones tumbling over each other in clumsy play, their sharp cries echoing like laughter through the clinic halls. He smiled to himself, remembering the stormy night when it all began, when fear and doubt had almost overshadowed love. Now the sight filled him with peace. The community's curiosity, once driven by rumors and fear, slowly turned into acceptance. Parents brought their children to peek at the little ones, teaching them not about strangeness but about loyalty and courage. Elders who had once whispered warnings now brought food and supplies, leaving quietly with softened expressions. It wasn't that the mystery had been solved, far from it. The question of what these newborns truly were still lingered, but what mattered more was who they had become, a family bound together by resilience. One evening, the assistant sat beside the vet, watching the mother nuzzle her growing young. "Do you regret your decision?" she asked softly. He shook his head, his gaze steady. "No, I chose love over answers, and sometimes that's the only choice that matters." His words carried a weight of finality, a quiet truth carved from weeks of struggle. The mother dog, sensing the human's presence, raised her head. Her eyes met the vet's, and for a fleeting moment it felt as though she understood. She gave a faint wag of her tail before lowering her head back onto her paws, her young ones curling against her side. That silent gesture spoke louder than any words could. Gratitude, trust, and the unbreakable bond of family. As the days turned into months, the unusual pups grew stronger, their differences more pronounced, but their bond to their mother, and to the people who protected them, remained unshaken. Some ran clumsily through the clinic halls, others curled beside her in the sunlight, but together they painted a picture that stirred the heart. They were not ordinary, but perhaps that was their gift, a reminder that love doesn't need explanations to be real. The vet wrote the final entry in his journal about the case, his pen moving slowly but firmly across the page. He didn't record scientific theories or genetic possibilities. Instead, he wrote a simple truth. They came into this world as mysteries but stayed as miracles. Whatever they are loved, and that is enough. That night, as the town quieted under a blanket of stars, the clinic glowed softly with light. Inside, the exhausted mother and her unusual litter slept peacefully, their bodies huddled together in warmth. The vet stood at the door for a long moment watching them, his chest swelling with emotion. Then he turned off the lamp, leaving them in gentle darkness, their breaths rising and falling in harmony. And so, what began as shock and fear ended in love and belonging. A dog had given birth to 15 lives that defied explanation, but instead of being torn apart by difference, they were held together by devotion. In the end, it didn't matter whether they were dogs or something else entirely. What mattered was the story they left behind, a story of courage, sacrifice, and the extraordinary power of a mother's love.